So how do we help prevent hoof rot? And well, first of all, what is hoof rot? And then how do we help prevent it?
So hoof rot is basically, once the time is wet, that's when you basically get lots of your hoof rot problems. Some of these problems are caused by bacteria. Some of them are sometimes you see feet that look like it's hoof rot, but it's actually not. We're seeing lots of fungal infections. We saw some the other day in Portland that are affected by, what we think is another type of organism that we call dermatophillosis. We saw some recently also that looks like they look like hoof rot, but they're actually caused by the immune system attacking itself, attacking the body and causing all of that problem. So we see that with, like, in human beings. I'm pretty sure you've heard about lupus.
Yes.
Yes. So we have it's a similar condition to lupus, where the body will attack itself, and then you see all sorts of problems around the foot and on the skin and all over the body. And these things, they can mimic hoof rot. They look like that. Animals will start to limp on the foot because it becomes very painful. So all of those things. But with hoof rot, basically what you have is you have invasion of bacteria around that area. Apart from maybe the brain, the hoof is one of the areas where you have most of those capillaries, small capillaries.
Okay.
And once you have bacterial invasion taking place down there, for example, in horses, you start finding that they're limping, and they start having lots of problems. So, and once you lose your feet, then the animal is gone.
Wow.
And with hooved animals, goats, sheep, pigs, and horses and cows, they are the main ones. Once they are in very cold, wet conditions, they will tend to have that problem, and it's very difficult to actually control, unless you have a slotted floor. It's one of the best things to actually prevent that. If your animals are on the ground and the ground is always wet, chances are you are going to run into that problem, especially if you live in places like Portland, St. Mary, where there's a lot of rain. It was only yesterday, I think, Portland had a flood. I saw that on the news.
Really?
And so, yeah, and so you will find that those animals might suffer a lot from that. Animals in Portland, they will suffer more from Clostridial infections and blackleg than anywhere else in the country because of the rainy season that they have. It's much different from the rest of the country. So with that type of problem with the feet, in those areas, you'll find it more than anywhere else.
Okay, so we need to keep them elevated, basically up out of the
keeping them elevated, keeping them out of the water, out of the mud, and check the feet on a day. You don't have to check it on a daily basis, but routinely, if you see an animal behaving weird, not limping, it's a good idea to check right there, because the earlier you get it, the better, the faster you can fix it. Okay. Have your vet check your animals on a regular basis. They don't have to be sick, but the correct thing to do is to have them do routine checks on your animals. You can schedule it for maybe every 2 months, every quarter, to ensure that, and have somebody else look at your animals, because you're there, you're looking every day, you cannot see everything, and use the analogy. You have some cobweb in your house and it's there for 10 years and you've never seen it. But the minute you invite somebody over, there it is, it's right there. So, I do it a lot with Dr. Young. She has animals, and every now and again she'll say, Patrick, have a look, because they're your animals. You're always there. You do not see everything. You do not see everything.
That's very true. Did you see my cobweb? Is that what you're talking about?
I did not see your cobweb.
You didn't? I have tons of it, though. We have so much we posted about it.
The next time I'll have a look. I'll have a better look the next time.
Please do. So if we find an animal with hoof rot, what do we need to do? Of course, take them out. How do we treat it? What do we need to do to treat it?
So, I'm a different type of vet. I always recommend to farmers that, you don't try to treat your own animals, because you do not always know what the best course of treatment is.
Guys, I hope you're taking notes. This is lots of information. Even I'm going, oh, wait a minute, I'm writing that one down. So lots of great information.
I'm back with you.
Sure.
I'm back with you.
Go ahead.
The first thing is that you don't try to treat your own animals, because you're not the best person to treat your own animals.
Okay.
It's best to get ideas from the professional. If your vet can't be on the farm, you can always drop a call, explain what you see. This is something that we call telemedicine. It's actually, it works. Explain what you see to your vet, tell them, and let them tell you what they think, and then they can recommend what's the best thing to do. because a lot of times farmers try to treat their own animals and then they do more harm than good. So that, that's the very first thing. Oftentimes they take all sorts of different antibiotics and medication and start to inject it into animals, and we can create our own problems by doing that. So it's best to let somebody who understands what's going on actually, have a look, or you talk to them, send them pictures, videos, because I do that a lot with farmers, and I think it works out a lot better than that, and it's under the law for veterinarians. That's basically how we should practice. Not just by hearing that it's foot rot, we're not sure. You'd call me and say, "Oh, I have foot rot," and I'll say, "Okay, give that," and we're not sure it's actually that because you think it's foot rot. So we have to do a thorough examination. A clean foot is always a good foot. Ensure that the foot is clean. Trim the hooves on a regular basis. And if we're actually dealing with that problem, then we are going to need to have the animals on systemic treatment. And also what we can do is, there's also copper sulfate solution that we use quite a bit for pigs too. We soak the foot in that, and it helps to harden the hoof a little bit. And once we have them on systemic treatment, and we use that, and also topical treatment, then that should be good enough for your animals. But do not self-treat. We always recommend to use the right drugs at the first time. We don't want to treat with something that did not work and then we try to use something else, because the problem right there that we're doing is we're giving the microorganisms in the body the chance to become resistant to what we're using first. And if that didn't work and we choose something else, we're creating microorganisms that we might not be able to deal with in the future.
Okay. All right. So, well, speaking about microorganisms, we can kind of segue just a little bit into worming, because that's always an ongoing problem for most people.
Yes.
So,
yes.
And I remember one of the presentations we had last year, or I should say one of the chats we had last year, we did talk about worming. So you can talk about a little bit, are you on the rule of thumb of using 2 types of medicines, and why, and how does that work? And, but first of all, how do you figure out your goat has worms or your animal has worms, and then how do you treat it?
So when you say 2 types of medication, do you mean use 2 types of medication at the same time?
Yes.
Okay. So in terms of worms, there are a few ways that you can actually check. The first thing that we do is the pharmacia, where you can look at the conjunctiva, and based on the level of the color, the level of redness, whether it's pale, it's white, or it's red, pink, we can say with some amount of certainty that the animal is suffering from a level of anemia. And with a certain level of anemia, we can assume that the animal might have a certain level of worm burden. Anemia does not always say worm, so we need to make that clear. Just by looking at the eyes and the animals are anemic, it does not mean that my animals have worm, because anemia could be because of many other factors. So we can look at your ruminants, level of anemia, we can say with some amount of surety that they might have a worm burden, and then we can go ahead and treat. Now, what do we use, and what sort of medication we use with certain types of worms? If our animals if you look at the feces, the next one you could do is collect fecal samples, take it to the lab. We do fecal flotation. We look down the microscope. We see eggs, and based on the morphology of the eggs, we can say, okay, that egg belongs to that worm, that one belongs to that worm, and then we can go ahead and treat like that. If you have tapeworms, they look like rice grain. When you look at the dog poop, you might see something like rice grain on it.
I've seen that,
those are tapeworms. Now, goats can have tapeworms. You could inject all the ivermectin in the world; it will not kill it.
Okay.
It will not. So so you really need to know which worm you're suffering from, and not just buy medication, buy Ivermec, buy Benvet, buy that one, and give it to your animals. We need to know the type of worm that we have. Because if you have tapeworm and you're giving Ivermec and you're giving, the Doramectin, it's like pouring water on them. It's not going to do any good. It's not going to kill them, because that's why you need to know the mechanism of action of these medications, how they work, and how they kill worms. So we need to know what you have first, and once you know what you have, then you can treat them. I do not recommend that you use 2 different medications at the same time.
Okay.
Reason being, that's one of the biggest ways of getting resistance. And we know that in the world, not just in Jamaica, we have a big problem with resistance. A lot of people will say, well, I bought Ivermec and it didn't work. Yes, it did not work because there is a problem with resistance, and we see that. When I was in the UK, quite a number of my friends were doing studies on similar medications, and they were all resistant, especially in the UK. They couldn't find one that worked in certain animals, in cows, for example. And there are many different types. You have some that they say can only be used for pigs, some that use for cows, especially if they have liver fluke. And so it's recommended that you do at least maybe every quarter, let a vet come in, collect the fecal samples, see the type of worms that you have, and then you know what you have, then you can know what to use when you treat. And since we're on the topic of treatment and worms, I've seen quite a number of people who just went out and they bought medication, they deworm their animals, and then they start having all sorts of abortions, and that is a major problem. So we need to know when to use the dewormers. We need to know which one to use if your animals are pregnant, and which one to use if your animals are pregnant. So it's quite.
What are your thoughts on only deworming if you need to? Because some people, they do it regularly, whether they need it or not. And then others say they only deworm as needed. What are your thoughts? Which school of thought are you?
So I am coming from the point of view that if you don't have a problem, don't try and fix it. So
Thank you only deworm.
You only deworm if you need to. And when you look, if you need to go down deeper into all of this, into this stuff, there's something called refugia, and people could look it up. When you're deworming, your aim is not to try and kill all worms, because there's going to be some amount of resistance right there. There is. Whether you believe it or not, there are resistant worms, there are resistant bacteria, they're there. Now, if you're pouring medication in and trying to get rid of all of these worms, you're going to have some amount of resistance. So what you want to do is to leave some of the ones that are not resistant inside there to fight back with the ones that are resistant. Because if you leave only resistant worm inside there, they are going to replicate. You're going to have more and more of them. And then what you're going to find is that you're going to have a whole herd with worms that are resistant to everything. So when you leave at least one or two of the non-resistant one with the one or two resistant one, they keep a balance. So the resistant worms can't replicate to the point where your whole farm is covered by the resistant ones. And so the aim is not to completely get rid of everything, is to leave a few right there. And as I said, if you don't have a problem, don't try and fix it. If it's not broken,
don't fix it.
No.
Okay. All right. So you're saying, because a lot of people they'll check their goats, the eyes don't look like they should. Okay, I have worm. They should be calling the vet to come and do a fecal sample instead of just give them this, give them.
I would strongly recommend that even if the eyes are looking okay, you do a routine fecal sample and see what's down there. It is good practice. It's best to know what you have, what you're dealing with. And as I said, pulling down the eyes and looking at the membrane does not always mean you have worms, because anemia can be from quite a number of other things. It does not mean worms, and it's best to do a fecal sample, see what you have. That one is telling. If there are worms there, eggs are going to come out. They will come out. If you have worms, you're going to see eggs. You're going to find something inside your fecal. So that's the best way of finding out whether or not you're having problem with worms or not.
Is there a cost for that?
It's minimal cost. It's not going to be a lot. It's minimal cost.
In the grand scheme of things, so the value of your herd, it's worth it.
It's worth it. And all they're doing, they're collecting poop, they're mixing up in a solution. The eggs will float. They collect those. They look at them if they're there, and they decide. They tell you which one that's from, and you know what type of worms you have, and then you can, if you need to treat, you can treat. If you don't have a problem, you don't need to treat.
Okay.